So to all current and former players, have you ever thought about a post-hockey career in media and broadcasting? Well, a number of players have successfully gone down that road following their playing career. And today we'll hear from 3 of them who will discuss how they did it. Thank you guys for being part of the PHPA's How They Did It interview series and offering players a glimpse into what goes into a successful career transition in hockey, media, and broadcasting. With us today, we've got the radio color analyst of the St. Louis Blues broadcasts on CMOX, Joey Vitale. We've got a podcaster and NHL studio analyst for Sportsnet in Canada, Luke Gazdic. And we have broadcaster, studio analyst, radio analyst, podcaster, author, public speaker, does it all, Corey Hirsch. Thank you so much again for joining us. My name is Daryl Dion from the Professional Hockey Players Association. So let's get to know our panelists. Can each of you just give a brief overview of your hockey journey and your on-ice pro career? So maybe Corey, I'll start with you.
Just played my junior hockey, grew up in Calgary, Alberta, played my minor hockey there, played junior hockey out in Kamloops, had some dynasties with Scott Niedermayer on my team. I played with arguably one of the top 5 defensemen ever in the history of the game in junior hockey. So I attribute a lot of my success to him. I went on to the New York Rangers, traded to Vancouver, played over 100 games, was in the Olympics in 1994, struggled with mental health issues throughout my whole career. So that's kind of what I do now. But moving forward, the transition was, right into goaltending coaching, Hockey Canada, and then the Blues and the Maple Leafs, went on to broadcasting. Now I'm an author and all this, but the transition, it seems, you always have to be reinventing yourself. You always have to be ready for the next step, thinking 2 steps ahead. That's kind of where I'm at. And today I'm a public speaker and I speak on mental health, and I go and I talk to men and women too, but mainly men, that encourage them to go get help if they need it.
Perfect. Joey, can you go through your on-ice career?
I'm happy to do this with you guys, and I appreciate you speaking so candidly about mental health. I think that's first of all, it's amazing. It's wonderful to carve a career to help people like that. I'm from St. Louis, born and raised. Played college hockey in Boston at Northeastern University, and then I was eventually drafted by the Penguins and started playing with the Penguins in 2009. Spent 6 seasons there, and then another 3 more years in Arizona. A lot of great times playing in the NHL and playing with some of the best players in the world, with Sidney Crosby and Shane Doan and the Keith Yandles and the Malkins of the world. And so I just picked up a lot of wonderful friends along the way, and certainly had a lot of fun playing hockey. My wife and I met in college. We had a child at pretty much every city we stopped at. We're at 5 right now. But in the meantime, I lost my career to not necessarily mental health, but a little bit. I got in a really nasty fight there at the end of my career with Miller from Boston, and that was it for me. And certainly some tough times, and going through concussions and a lot of the pain of retirement. Went through quite a pit journey of lasted about 2 to 3 years after I retired from the Coyotes. But ultimately, it set myself up well, and it unfolded in a cool way where people were looking out for me, and you just try to keep opportunities open. You try to treat people right as best you can along the way, and you just hope for the very, very best. So right now I'm a St. Louis Blues radio broadcaster. We do all the games, and I also do a lot of work for Bally on the TV side in studio, and also a lot for 101 ESPN. So it's been a really cool journey, a wild journey. I never would have imagined in a million years I'd be in broadcasting, 15, 10, even 5 years ago. So it's been crazy. It's been a lot of fun, and it's just great to be back in the sport of hockey.
Luke, how about your on-ice career?
I was born in Toronto here. I'm back home. Played junior hockey in the OHL for 3 years with the Erie Otters. Was fortunate enough to get drafted to Dallas in the 6th round to the Stars. Turned pro in the East Coast League in Boise, Idaho, 2009. Played 4 years in the minors for the Texas Stars, and ended up getting picked up on waivers by the Edmonton Oilers right before training camp of my 5th year pro. I flew out to Edmonton and got to play my first NHL game, NHL record. I scored on my very first shift on my first shot.
It's going to work well. A lot more pressure on the linesman to make those decisions at the dots. There's a backhand in front, they score! It's Gazdic! Luke Gazdic throwing it from the corner. Luke Gazdic, who 48 hours ago was on waivers.
The Oilers goal! His first goal in his first NHL game!
Now they're giving it to Gazdic.
first NHL goal 14 seconds into my first shift, which is a major highlight of my career. Got to spend 3 years in Edmonton, play with some incredible players, Connor McDavid in my last year, spent a year in New Jersey system, and ended in San Diego in the minors in 2018, 19, and 20. Pandemic hit. And didn't know it then, but that was my last professional hockey game that I played before the season got cut short. Moved back home here to Toronto during the pandemic. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, that was a very challenging transition / figuring out retirement / navigating through the pandemic. It took me about 3 years to get my footing. I'll go through this a bit, more in detail, but got a call from Sportsnet. They were looking for a studio analyst to do some Oiler regional games, and I jumped on, and here we are almost 2 years later with Sportsnet, and got to be on Hockey Night Canada this year and do some playoffs and some Stanley Cup finals, and started my own podcast on the side that I've kind of put down for a second, but just kind of getting my feet wet in the broadcast and industry here in Toronto.
I think it's so cool that your hockey journeys and your experience encapsulated the American Hockey League, some in the ECHL as well. You've touched on a lot of things already that we're going to talk about. First one I want to ask you is, how did you get your start in broadcasting?
Quite honestly, I was a mess. I was not doing anything. I was kind of just living up at my cottage north of Toronto, really trying to figure out the next steps. I truly didn't really have too much of an idea of what I wanted to do. And was trying to figure that out. I was leaning on the NHL alumni and the PHPA with some transition stuff when I got basically cold called from Sportsnet, from one of the higher ups in the hockey division. And he asked if I wanted to try out doing some intermission stuff with Gene Principe, doing some Oiler regional games from the studio in Toronto during the pandemic. 2 games led to 4 games, led to, getting on the Hockey Central show. And to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing when I started. And it was picking up things along the way and leaning on my coworkers. And like I said, we're almost 2 years later here, and I've kind of climbed up the ladder at Sportsnet, but it started off being something that I didn't even see in my future. It was a situation that I was in. I don't want to say I was like the movie Yes Man, but I made a commitment to myself that if I was called with any opportunities, just say yes. Just go try it, see if you like it, and go from there. So I told that to the Sportsnet people, and we agreed on 2 games and ended up really enjoying it. And here we are.
Joey, how about you? How did you get your start in broadcasting, and what's going on at the time, and how did you land your first gig?
So when I got hurt, I went back home. We had 3 kids at the time. Overwhelmed, stressed out, depressed. I mean, you can just name it. I mean, whatever these players are going through and what you will go through as a retired hockey player, it's all real. We've all felt it to some degree, as you're probably seeing pretty soon in this conversation. And I remember when I moved back to St. Louis, there were a lot of opportunities that, guys were reaching out to me, and old friends and acquaintances, and, hey, what you want to grab lunch? And I kept saying no because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I just kept shutting things down. And it was actually a conversation I had with my wife, when I was kind of really in the pits of not knowing what I was going to do. And she just said, Joey, I think you just need to go out there and do something. I think you just got to say yes to something and just start there. And I remember it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was such a simple message. But the very next day, like Luke just said, I said, all right, I'm just going to say yes to the very next thing that comes up. One of the things I shut down quite a bit was a former college player of mine, Kyle Kramer, used to always invite me to go to these men's league games every Tuesday morning. Cam Jansen and a lot of like local St. Louis kids, retired pros were there, and I'm hamming it up in the locker room. It was great to be back and be in that setting and telling stories and playing hockey. And sure enough, Andy Strickland, who does a lot of work on the TV side for at the time Fox Sports Midwest, comes up to me and he says, hey, you ever think about broadcasting? And I said, I don't even know what that is. I didn't even know 2 guys were on the air. I didn't know there was like a play-by-play guy and a color guy. I mean, I just played the game. Again, there's so much we don't know. And he said, well, Kelly Chase is going to retire after 18 years being a broadcaster for the Blues, and they're looking to fill a spot. Would you like me to put a call in for you? And I said, sure. Again, whatever. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I would love to sit down and have lunch with anybody. So I met with Chris Kerber, and 2 months later, After a pretty intense interview process with a lot of former Blues that were included, he ended up luckily picking me. And then sure enough, started the year in 2018 with the Blues, and 9 months later, they won the Stanley Cup, and Curbs and I were in Boston for Game 7, and we're making the final call. So it was a crazy year, but I all go back to, like Luke said, making the intention to just say yes and just, being open to opportunities was something that I did by just saying yes to go play morning skate. And then you just have a conversation with someone, and ultimately it led to some pretty cool stuff.
Corey, how about you? How'd you get your start?
Well, I goalie coached for quite a long time. And then after that, coaching, you kind of get hired to get fired. So, if you want to get on that train, that's up to you. I didn't like that train after playing. So then I started looking into broadcasting. But what I did during my playing career was I would go in studio. I wouldn't just do interviews on camera at the rink in the locker room. I would go in studio places. I'd go sit with the morning sports guys, and just like all during my career, right? No matter where I was, whether it was Big Ten or in the NHL or whatever. So that kind of preluded into getting into broadcasting. But like with Joey, I got some advice too coming out of the game. I was preparing for the next season, and the goalie equipment, one of the Bond goalie equipment guys calls me and goes, "Hey, what do you want for gear this year?" It was to prepare me for say. I said, "No, I'm retiring. I don't. I'm not going to be playing this year anymore." And he's like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said to me something that I'll never forget. He's like, "Hershey, you have to. Nobody's looking for Corey Hirsch anymore, right? You're done. You're going to have to go and let people know that you're available for work." And I took that to heart, and that's how I kind of transitioned into everything. Broadcasting, I kind of fell into. Sportsnet got that monster deal, and they were trying to fill a lot of spots, and I was tweeting games, and Elliot Friedman saw me on Twitter, and just I was saying silly stuff, and just and I was unemployed. Transition, right? Sucks. No money coming in. I was getting divorced at the time. Like it was tough times. And then Elliot Friedman threw me a line, but it goes back to saying the same thing. If you don't put yourself out there, no one's looking for you anymore when you're done, right? You got to put yourself out there. And that's kind of how my broadcasting career went. It's transitioned into other things now, writing and speaking, but those are great skills to have. And that's kind of how it came about for me.
Hey, Daryl, if you don't mind, I just want to jump on just to kind of round that off, because I think when some people are listening, like I said, I got cold calls, but I echo what Corey said, because I'm going to say about 3 weeks before that, I had sat down with Elliot at the CBC offices, and we were recording a documentary on Jim Oss, who was our Oilers old equipment manager who passed away. And after that, Elliot asked if this is something. He said, "You're a really good speaker. Have you ever thought about doing broadcasting?" And I said, "Sure." So that's echoing what Corey said, in like at least getting your name out there and letting people know that you still exist and you're ready and willing and able to work.
Yeah, very cool that you put yourself out there, and a shout out to Elliot as well. I know he helps us out a lot here too. So that's very cool how connected the hockey community is. So I want to talk about for you, the hiring and the interview audition process that each of you have been through. Like, what was that experience like? But most important, like, what do you think made you stand out as a successful candidate? And maybe I'll start with Joey, because from what I read, like you were lauded for you were super prepared. You asked intelligent questions during your interview. So what was that process like for you to land that gig?
I think I was raw, and I think that my partner appreciated that. When I played the game, I don't know about Corey and Luke, but I was never the guy in the stall reading all the stats of all the players. Like I was just kind of like hyper focused on playing hard. So, and that's probably why I ended up fighting the guy I shouldn't have fought multiple times, because I just didn't do my homework. But that was also kind of the why I was also, running and going after the top players too, because I just didn't care. And I kind of looked at broadcasting the same way. I didn't do my research. I didn't really study it. I was just trying to be me, and I was just trying to go in and just be myself, which I think Curbs appreciated. And, one of the questions that, Chris Kerber, years later, he told me that one of the reasons why he liked me in the interview process was I asked one question that no one asked, or two questions rather. I didn't ask how much the position would pay, was number one, which he appreciated. I didn't find out until I got the job. And then number two, I asked him, because again, I was just raw. I go, what does it take to do the job well? And he was kind of stunned by the question. And my thing was, if I can't do it well and commit to it fully, there's no point in me even just trying. I wasn't going to half-ass anything. So those were the two questions that were big. I think two other things in the interview process to give people, and I will tell this to my kids one day, try to remember names. That's something my dad and mom, I give them credit for what they did for me. But I remember walking into the interview and I introduced myself to the secretary, and her name was Ernestine. And went there and talked to Tom Stillman and Chris Zimmerman and all the big shots, Doug Armstrong. And I left, and Chris was walking me out, and I said, Ernestine, have a great day. I think, remembering the secretary's name, again, I wasn't trying to be phony or not myself. It was just, I tried to do a good job of remembering people's names. I didn't realize it'd have an impact. And certainly Curbs told me later, he goes, I like that you cared about her and to know, even just ask her name. And the last piece was I was going to do the mock period, where we sat in a room. It was the summertime, keep in mind. There was a screen. They got a game from last season. He just told me it was Blues versus Minnesota Wild. Again, I had never even called the game before. I was just going in there ready to talk hockey, and I'm getting ready to leave. And my wife says, where are you going? Again, I allot to her, and I go, I'm going to my interview. And she goes, you're going like that? I think I was wearing like a hoodie like this. And she goes, go put on a suit and tie. I'm like, I'm not putting on a suit and tie. It's like mid-July. It's like 100 degrees outside. I go, honey, you don't understand. This is just me and Curb sitting down in a room, and we're just talking through. It's more about the audio. And she goes, get up there and put on a suit and tie and make it your best tie. So I did, and I felt like such an idiot. And it was actually two people that wore a suit and tie to the interview. But again, Curbs liked that I cared enough to ask good questions. I cared enough to wear a suit. I cared enough to ask people what their names were. I think it's all the little things. I guess you're probably taught in kindergarten, right? I know it sounds crazy, but treat people right and try to be prepared and ask good questions and care about others. And again, I was just trying to be who I felt like my parents raised me to be. I have no credit to myself. And at the end of the day, it just kind of worked out. So that was it. I had no other experience beside that.
Yeah, mine was just thrown on air as well. I was starting off with a doubleheader. I think they were playing LA the very first game. I remember sitting on the desk and the lights went on and we were going live in 5. My producer was in my ear, and I remember asking, is anyone going to tell me what to do or what to say here? And I kind of just went with it. And, one of the biggest things for me that I had to learn, and I'm glad they gave me the chance to continue to go, was just being authentic and being my real self. That I considered that my interview process was the first 4 or 5 games that I did. I had a bit of, what's that called? Not like an inferiority complex, but I didn't play 1,000 games. I haven't won a Stanley Cup. Like I started in the East Coast League, and I thought of that as a negative. And it took me a while to, really be proud of my, not took a while to be proud of my career, but to use that experience when I'm on air. I don't try to be somebody I'm not. I think they really liked that I was still pretty fresh out of the game. I knew the names of some face-off plays that they were running. And I think it was just a good combination of me just, trying to be myself. Same thing that Joey said. I never asked for money. I just assumed we were trying it for free. I didn't know we were going to get paid here, but didn't ask about a salary, didn't ask about anything, just was grateful for the opportunity. And the little stuff just came with it. I was fortunate enough to work with Gene Principe, who hosts the Oilers on Sportsnet, and he's just a pro's pro. And so for the little things about, when to talk and how to answer questions and when we're going live, that stuff just came with asking questions. But up till today and till when I worked in the Stanley Cup Finals post game last year, I just try to be myself always and try to, be as authentic as possible.
Luke, I think it's called imposter syndrome, and it goes back, just be yourself, right? Like I think the common with the three of us, we all went on air. We were just be ourselves, right? Be genuine, be real, and that's really cool, and you get opportunity.
Corey, maybe expand on that a little bit too. But what do you enjoy most about the broadcasting role?
TV's electric. TV's fun, the lights and all that. What I liked about it is that you're still involved in the game in some capacity, right? And it's really, once you're out of the game, it's hard to get back in. It's not easy, but just being able to share knowledge and, as a hockey player, we're entertainers. I know we think of ourselves as athletes and, whatever, but in fact, I mean, people pay to watch us play. We are entertainers. And I felt like TV and broadcasting, you're still doing what your role is and what you are, which is an entertainer. You're entertaining people. And not to take yourself too seriously, but have fun with it, because that's an escape for some people from their day, right? From their stresses, from their problems, is to sit and listen to you. So be entertaining. I think that was probably the biggest takeaway for me from broadcasting.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I don't know if Corey and Joey shared this experience, but I had a major disdain for hockey when I first ended. I didn't end the way I exactly wanted to. It was in the middle of the pandemic. Did not love my experience my last year, just being a veteran guy on a young team in the American League. So I'm not going to lie. The first little bit of watching hockey again was a little challenging for me. And I just grew into it. Like I echo what Corey said in that it's electric. Like the game nights felt like I was almost playing again, where I'd wake up in the morning, you do your prep with your producer, go kind of do a little meeting in the morning, go there over, in the evening and get your suit on, hair and makeup, and the lights go up and you have your production meeting, and it was all just very cool. And now I think the funnest thing for me is, we sit in the back green room, we call it, in the studio room, and we're just watching the game with a couple former players, whether it's Jamal Mayers or Kevin Bieksa or Kelly Rudy, whoever I'm working with. Like, we're sitting there watching the game and telling stories and swapping experiences and breaking down the game as it goes. And it really reignited a love for the game back for me. When I didn't start there, it took a while to flip that over, but it's gotten back to the point now where I thoroughly enjoy going in there and watching hockey and, relaying some stuff on TV.
Luke, I hear that from a lot of other players too, about when they do step away from the game and they have a bit of a disdain. They're not playing anymore. So it is a very real thing. It's very common. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Joey, what about you? What do you enjoy most about your broadcasting role?
Well, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm just going to be very honest. I enjoy the summers. I enjoy my summers off. I mean, I think most people would agree, especially when you start having families. When I stopped playing, I got into construction a little bit. I got into a couple of different careers I was kind of toying with. And one was pouring concrete, because that was my family business here in St. Louis. And I'll never forget, it was like May 1st, and the kids were kind of slowly getting out of school. And I remember getting ready for work, thinking like, when is summer break? But there's just no summer break. Like, when you have a full-time job, adults work year round. I know it sounds like common sense, but it didn't hit me till it was like, it's June, and why am I still working? Like, because I've been playing hockey my whole life. So that was a hard moment for me, thinking like, God, I gotta go to work, 365 days a year. This is ridiculous. So to be completely real, one of the coolest moments about, obviously the guys, what they said, I echo. One of the coolest moments coolest ideas about broadcasting is you get time off, you get summers off, you get to have vacation, you get to decompress, get away from the season. So that to me is certainly one of the greatest things about it. And towards the end of my career, I loved just hanging out with the guys. I loved sewer ball. I loved dinners on the road. And I kind of was slowly weaning away from the competitiveness of the game. I was getting older, and I just love talking hockey. I love just talking to players and being curious about people and being curious about situations and learning. Luke mentioned Jamal Mayers. We actually coach a youth hockey team together here. Both our sons are on the 2012 AAA Blues team here. You're right. Listening to him talk, wow, like the mind and how he breaks the game down. I mean, it's cool. It's social. It's fun. You're curious. You get to know people. So between just loving to talk to people and having my summers off, I will say it's a wonderful career. I think Corey said it, though. There's not many jobs. There's not many opportunities. So when you can get one, it's hard to screw up, but people have done it in the past. So just try not to say anything stupid.
We've talked a lot about the good, about the hockey broadcasting and the media, but there are some drawbacks. So can each of you discuss, for you, is there anything? Is it the travel? Is it public scrutiny? Is it what's a drawback, or if any, that you've experienced?
There's some tough things. I think the biggest is that you'll never I like to say this is discouragement, but you'll never find a job that's as fun as playing hockey. It's just not going to happen, right? I mean, you can enjoy your life, but the transition is just different. You can find other things you enjoy. What I found is that for me, like helping other people and being of service is what fills my soul now, right? So, but it's so much different from the game and being around the guys and fun, like it's where it's all about you. But the transition that way. But as far as like broadcasting, people can be mean, man. The social media aspect of it, I always try and teach people when I speak is if you're going to use social media, use it for good. But a lot of people choose to use it for a weapon, right? And that's not cool. That's to me, that's not cool. So that's part of it. There's always in radio and television, there's always budget cuts and things, and you have to kind of, sometimes you get caught in that. But I look back, I'm thankful for all of it. I mean, as far as the negatives go, the positives far outweigh the negatives, right? And it's a beautiful thing. But the transition is hard. And then I say this, I've talked to Paul Bizanet quite a bit about this, and I always commend Paul because he came out of the game with guns blazing. He's like, I'm not stopping, I'm going. And he went out and he did it himself, right? Like he got jobs. You have to go out there and go get that stuff. I always tell people, the guys that sit a year, 2, 3 years after their career, man, that's just a recipe for depression. The minute you retire, you got to get out there. That was another good advice too, is that you got to get out there right away. Don't, taking time off because you've been a hockey player. The longer you take time off, the more depression sets in, the longer people start to forget you as well. Right. So the second you decide to retire, boom, you're hitting the ground running.
Okay, Luke, how about you? What maybe a drawback about the broadcasting role?
Yeah, I've been sitting here trying to think of a couple because honestly, like Corey said, there aren't a ton with broadcasting, but I'm glad he said it. The biggest one for me has been social media and having to deal with that side of it. When I played, Twitter X wasn't as big as it was, first of all. And I also didn't read and check it a lot when I played. And I think I fell into that a lot the last year or two, was reading every comment and notification people say about you. And I had a bit of a situation a couple months ago. It didn't turn out very well in the sense that I kind of, I was leaning into it too much, and Twitter has changed a lot to the sense where it can be a really tough place. And when you start reading it a lot and kind of accepting it as fact and criticism, that's why I think when you can get in trouble. So I think the biggest drawback of that is just managing your social media and understanding that not everyone is going to like you ever. So it's a tough thing to get over, but that's just something that comes with being on TV and being a public figure.
Yeah, I mean, travel's always tough with 5 little ones at home. You end up missing stuff. You do. Like I said, the benefit is summer's off. The tough side is travel. I mean, but that's an uncontrollable thing and something you just kind of work through. When I was thinking about signing up for this job, I reached out to Tyson Nash and I asked Tyson, I said, tell me about this job. And I'll never forget him saying, Joey, it's just the greatest job in hockey. And I remember him saying that, and it's been 7 years I've been in the booth. He's absolutely right. It is the best job in hockey. I was talking to a GM a couple months ago, and he was talking about a player that wanted to become an assistant coach. He's in player development. And he just took me aside. He said, I don't know why anyone would ever want to go down that road. Corey talked about it. It's a very conditional, loving position. It's hard. It's hard because you get hired, you get fired, you get moved around. All of a sudden, you're doing good. A GM gets brought into the new team, and now you're out. It's so temperamental, right? So, like I said, it's broadcasting. You're still in the game, and you're enjoying the game, and you're entertaining people, as either Luke or Corey said. Someone said that it's a great work because you're just entertaining. So it's been amazing. So there's not many downsides, the only, and not just the broadcasting thing, but I was just thinking out loud. A big adjustment from post-career to this. And it kind of ties in with broadcasting, but, getting used to talking to normal people was an adjustment for me. I'll never forget, there was like a dinner party I went to a couple of years after I retired, and somebody I kind of knew from school got a haircut, and I kind of like made a comment about his haircut, which we like typically do as hockey players. And I found out like 2 weeks later, he hadn't talked to me, and he was really offended by that comment, which I guess would be an offensive comment if you didn't know me. And so like getting out of the, like, for a lot of the players watching, like, getting out of the mindset of how you joke and how you talk to people in the locker room and your friends and your buddies and you carve into each other about haircuts and everything. There's an adjustment coming for you. Like when you go to school drop off, or you go to church, or you go to the grocery store, you run into someone from, there's a certain way to behave and talk to people that I was really away from for a while. So that took my wife's help and a lot of family help to help me resettle into the proper way to address things.
Guys, as I was researching your backgrounds, I came across some interesting quote from each of you that seemed relevant to what we're talking about today. Corey, I'll start with your quote that I found on you. And you said, it was tough to get back in. I'm not going to lie. It's competitive. There's not a lot of jobs out there, and there's a lot of good people trying to get them. I was pretty happy to get in with Vancouver. I couldn't ask for a better place to come back to. This is where I wanted to be. So, Corey, as you mentioned, you started your broadcasting career. You worked ECHL, some junior games. So how can players navigate the competitive landscape of broadcasting? But what are some of the things they can do now to kind of set themselves up to land a broadcasting gig?
Yeah, it goes back to just throwing yourself into everything, saying yes. I think Luke and Joey said it. Say yes, right? Don't pass up opportunities to speak or to get on radio, no matter how small it is. If you're living in Vancouver and you played for the Pittsburgh Penguins, call the sports guys in Pittsburgh, like they're, and say, hey, let's do an interview. Guys are always looking for former players to interview about hockey, sports shows, all that. So do that stuff, right? Send your resume out there. Like you don't ask, you don't get. It's a tough industry, and no question. Have something else, right? Have something else you can keep going with, and then a little bit of luck and a little bit of timing is kind of everything.
Okay, Luke. So following your broadcasting debut, here's a quote I found for you. He said, it was nowhere near natural. Immediately after my first segment on TV, I had so much more respect for anybody who goes on live TV and can even articulate a sentence. The first time my heart was beating and I was just thinking of what is everyone going to think about me? Now I just try to keep it natural and organic as possible. So Luke, what do you remember most from your first time going live on air? And like, how did you get through it? And looking back on it now, like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I just remember being really nervous and really putting stock in like carrying into the opinion of others and leaning on like, hey, how did I do? How did I look? How did this sound? And trying to be a little too polished, just trying to be a broadcaster when I think in our hearts and in my heart, I'm a hockey player that is now, broadcasting. So, like I said, it took me some time to kind of evolve into that. But just try not to be too polished. Like we are a little rough around the edges, and we've been through some crazy experiences, 11 years of pro hockey in 3 different leagues for me. So just try to articulate that experience, look in the camera and share it with the audience, and pretend like they're right in the living room with you here, or you're in their living room, just kind of talking hockey with them and breaking it down for them. I always talk to my mom a lot, and I kind of, my thing is like, if I'm going to do a segment or I'm breaking down a play or something like that, articulate it so my mom can understand it, who she knows hockey, but she doesn't know hockey. Like she doesn't know the finer details. So I kind of try to just make it content that people can ingest and people can enjoy.
So Joey, a quote that I found on you, you said, I'm more tired as a broadcaster than I was as a player. You have to constantly be on top of what's going on in the league. The prep work that goes into a game is almost exhausting because you have to hit every angle. You have to prepare for every single event, every single player being spotlighted. So you spend hours prepping for a game with the understanding that you're probably only going to use 8% of everything you just prepped for. So Joey, how do you prep before you go on air? Like what goes into your routine?
How serious do you want to take this job? Do you want to be a hockey player that talks about hockey still, or do you want to be a broadcaster? I wanted to be a broadcaster. I wanted to learn how to broadcast. My career was over. I think all these guys are basically saying that our career's done. Now, do you want to take pride in this next career, which is broadcasting? So I put a lot of attention to detail in my preparation. I was helped along the way tremendously by Chris Kerber, who's my partner. And maybe in a very different way, but an awesome way, Darren Pang. He was the TV color guy, and I spent the first 6 seasons riding right next to him in every airplane, and we went out to dinners together. And there is a sharp man right there in Darren Pang. I mean, the way he prepares, the way he studies, the way he has relationships with general managers, but also the new players. I mean, he's just has got this wonderful charisma about him. So I saw a lot of people. I saw the way they did things, and I wanted to try to mimic. I wanted to try to mimic all that. And, it's tough because, as these guys will tell you, Corey hops on something. He wants to maybe lay something out, or Luke's like, hey, I want to focus on this, and I want to be watching out for this. But you know what? Sometimes the game doesn't present itself like that. And you just have to let it go in one year, and you have to let it go out the other, because it's just not appropriate for the timing. So I think that quote, it reminds me so much of when we were in high school or grade school, and the teacher said, we have 100 questions on the exam. Here's the study guide, 100 questions, right? I'm only going to pick 20 on the test. As a kid, you go home, you have to study all 100 because you don't know which 20 she's going to pick. And that's a hockey game. That's breaking down a hockey game. You got to be prepared for just about every situation, knowing that you're probably only going to need to use about 10 to 20% of it if you're lucky. So, and you keep it somewhere. I mean, I have it all stashed, and I have notebooks and, binders of stuff. And, and I think that things kind of come in and out as you go through your career. And I remember that, years ago, I remember reading this about, whether it be Ryan Suter or something, then you can kind of bring it in. But essentially, it is a lot of preparation. And as you enter into the broadcasting career, as of course Corey and Luke have done a phenomenal job, you have to make the decision that you're no longer a hockey player. You are a broadcaster. And I think the people that do that will have a long career in this business. And I think, unfortunately, for the people that are just kind of stuck on being a hockey player, talking hockey, I think it's very short-lived.
We're going to wrap things up here. But lastly, guys, what advice would you give to any current or former players who are considering a career in hockey media, broadcasting, or even a similar field?
Well, you know what? One thing I picked up from listening to Joey and Corey that, I wish I did a little more is don't be afraid to lean on other people. Like, we are so strong-willed, and we're like, I can do this myself. Like, whether it's transitioning from hockey, whether it's trying to find a job, whether it's trying to clean your life up, like, don't be afraid to pick up the phone, call some ex-teammates, call guys that if you like broadcasting, call someone that's broadcasting right now. Ask them how they like the gig, how they got into it, what they like, what they don't like. Do what we're doing right now. If it's a trade, if it's whatever it is, don't be afraid to use other people and use isn't a great word, but call other people, lean on people for advice, man. Like, there are so many people out there that are ready and willing to help you in your career and your transition. And don't be so hard-headed that you think you can figure it all out yourself.
Put yourself out there. But Luke said it very well. Lean on other people. My thing is mental health. The transition, we all really can struggle with it. Don't be afraid to call the PHPA. Don't be afraid to call the NHL alumni. There's programs available if you're struggling with the transition. We've all been through it. We've all done it. And then ultimately, when it's putting yourself out there. You don't ask, you don't get, and nobody's looking for you anymore. So you got to make sure that you get yourself out there. But the most important thing for me is, if you're struggling out there, please call the PHPA, call the NHL alumni, call me, call Luke, call Joey. We've all been through it. It's the transition can be tough.
Yeah, I mean, that's so good what Luke said. Just, lean on other people. And, Corey mentioned it earlier, and it's so worth it. I think he mentioned it as far as don't wait, do it now while you're playing. There was a game I had to miss a few years back for a health thing, and Chris Thorburn, who was in his final year of his contract, they asked Chris, they said, hey, you want to hop on and do a game with Curbs? Joe can't make the game. And Thorburn was under contract as a player. He's like, sure. And he called a playoff game against the San Jose Sharks. That's the attitude you have to have. Don't wait. BJ Crombie, when I was playing with him in Arizona, he was on the plane doing all his finance stuff. He was hustling while he was waiting. He was working on what does the post-career look like. I think all three of us, to some degree, have some form of regret is we maybe waited a little bit too long. Now, knowing what I know and what these guys probably would attest to is, I could have started probably a little bit sooner, whatever that looked like, jumping on a radio podcast, doing some different things, reaching out to some teams. Hey, my career's coming to an end. Any interest in using me, any interest in this? Here's a reel. Here's a radio show I did on 590 The Fan a year ago, whatever. Just don't wait. jump on it, get on it soon while you're still playing. And then maybe that window that we've all, Corey, Luke, and I have all talked about, that tough window of post-career, maybe it doesn't have to be 2 years or 3 years. Maybe it could be 6 months for you if you do your homework and you kind of lay the groundwork ahead of time.
Guys, fantastic, amazing advice. If any current or former players are interested in a career in broadcasting, please reach out to any of these panelists. Call the PHPA office. You can speak to our Career Enhancement Program Coordinator, Steve Carney, who can help set you on your path. But guys, thank you so much for your time and sharing your experience. And that's how they did it.